Hey, folks. Welcome to another great edition here on the Bailey Pod. Wow, what a week 6 in the Nick 10. What a week 6 in the Nick 10. Saw some really great games. We got it for you here. The crosstown rival, Belvidere North, Belvidere. Wow, what a treat that was. Guys, this is one show you do not want to miss. Don't touch that dial. Don't go anywhere. Invite the neighbors over. Your grandma's there. Let her stay. Let her stay tonight. Let her stay. I know how grandmas can be, but let her stay tonight. And we get ready to get into this show. Before we do that, viewers, subscribers, go ahead and treat yourself to some popcorn here on the Bailey Pod, because you know what? It's getting ready to be that type of night. Welcome to the Bailey Pod, folks. Let's go. Hey, happy Thursday. I hope everybody's off to a great week, enjoying this Thursday. I tell you, this weather couldn't be any better than what it's been all week. Make sure you guys get out, go support your teams. I say that, each and every week. I think it's important that, you get out and you support these guys. These guys do a lot during the offseason to prepare themselves for what you guys see on Friday night. Guys, before we get into the show, I just want to pause for a second, as I usually do each and every week, and just express my thanks to all the viewers, to all the subscribers. You guys keep coming. I'll keep serving. Make sure you guys, click that bell in the right-hand corner so you guys can be notified for any new content that we'll be dropping each and every week. Again, I want to thank you for subscribing and following. It means a lot to me. If you haven't been sitting with us on the Bailey Pod yet, I think tonight you're going to want to sit with us. If not tonight, join us before the end of the football season, because you're in for a treat. Guys, we're going to go ahead and move forward here. We're going to actually bring on our guest here, our contributor, Harold Bone of the Rockton-Roscoe News. He's with us tonight. We're going to bring him up here on the screen here in just a second. There he is, Harold Bone, Rockton-Roscoe News. What's happening, Harold?
Hey, Tim. I'm just enjoying this great weather that you mentioned. And, yeah, get out and support your high school football program. Right now it's a great time of year. Fall weather is starting to turn. It feels more like football weather in my eyes anyway. And we're over halfway through the season, so we don't have that much football left.
Wow. Can you believe that, man? I mean, we are literally over halfway through the season, and every Friday, the show comes out every Thursday night, and each and every week goes by, and I'm just like, wow, we're almost at the end of this thing. The regular season it is. Obviously, we have the playoff, show that we do. But, man, Harold, I mean, wow, where does time go, man, when you're having fun, right?
Oh, exactly. Every Friday night, Thursday or Saturday, whenever the games are, I love to go out there. Love to see the fans supporting the players, and the players, just having a great time. And you mentioned they put all that time in the offseason and all the things they do for every community. Rockford, the surrounding communities, they do so much. And every Friday night it's an honor to me to be able to watch a high school football game. It's always been that way since I was a little kid, and now that I'm a gray-haired old man, it's an honor to me to see those kids on the field every Friday night, banging heads and doing everything they need to.
You can't, Harold. You can't see mine, but I got a little gray coming too now, man. So I ain't too far behind you. But anyway, thanks for joining the Bailey Pod tonight, Harold. We got a boatload of things to get through tonight. We're going to try to get through the show as expeditiously as possible, but just make sure we cover, everything that we need to cover tonight. And Harold, I want to start off. There was a young man. I want to highlight something that happened to a young man over at Rochelle. I think you know a little bit about that more than I do, but I hear the young man's doing better. I just want to take time to pause and wish that young man a speedy recovery, because you never want to see anything like that. You can speak to a little bit about that better than I can, Harold. You have a little bit more intel on that than I do. Go ahead and talk to us a little bit about how that young man's recovering. And actually, you can just start with, what actually happened to this young man.
Yeah, so last Friday night, Dylan Manning for the Rochelle football team, over a 2,000-yard rusher, just a tremendous football player. He's been playing since his freshman year. So big part of their football program. He was injured in a game last Friday night as they were taking on Morris in the Interstate 8 conference football game. And he got hit, had some issues on the sidelines. They transported him to the Loyola Medical Center Friday night, and then over the weekend he had brain surgery to relieve the pressure and the swelling that was going on in his brain. As the days have gone by, he has continued to progress and get better. He's got a long way to go. He does. That's not something to mess with. Is your head area? He's getting better. I know the Rochelle football program are asking for everyone's support and prayers, and we send those along to him, to Dylan and his family and the entire community. Rochelle is a wonderful community. If you haven't been out there, check it out. It's a wonderful community. They have a great football program and a great football legacy. And Dylan Manning, he's back. He's still in the medical center. He'll be there for a while, and they're just keeping an eye on him. But it's just a terrible situation that occurred last Friday night against Morris. It wasn't I would say a vicious play or anything dirty. It was just, it's part of what happens in the game of football sometimes. When you compete, things and injuries occur, and that's kind of what happened. And Dylan he's a tough kid. He's a great kid. Lots of people in the community that I've spoken with have spoken tremendously highly of him as a young man. And he's a leader both on and off the field. And we continue to send our support and love to Dylan Manning and the complete Rochelle football program.
Absolutely. And, again, you never want to see anything like this. And, the type of show that we have, I mean, we're going to talk about, teams and players outside the Nick 10. I mean, I know the basis of the show is we covered Nick 10 high school football, but, speedy recovery to that young man over at Rochelle. I'm pretty sure Rochelle, continue to do what they do week in and week out. And now, probably want to go ahead and try to, win the rest of their games here in these next few weeks, sort of like dedicate the rest of the season to this young man here. So again, speedy recovery to him. Send my blessings out to the family. Again, speedy recovery to that young man down at Rochelle High School.
Yeah, we're going to go ahead. The same football family, Tim.
Yep, absolutely agreed. We're going to go ahead and move forward. I want to illuminate a sport that we never really talk about, but like I said, my goal is to make my show the most comprehensive show here in the area, and I think by doing this today, I think we start here. Hononegah girls flag football. I mean, congratulations to Hononegah girls. They're now 17-0 this season. Harold, you follow this sport a little bit more than I do. Can you give us a little insight on how good this program is over there at Hononegah?
Well, I would say the Nick 10 in general have been tremendous. Last year, Guilford getting to the state championship game, they dropped it to Palatine, but just a tremendous conference of athletes up and down the lineup. This year, Hononegah, they're actually 18-0 with their first round win the other day against Jefferson. They play Thursday night against Round Lake. Round Lake has a tremendous player there, so it's going to be quite a challenge for Hononegah, but they're 9-0. Tim, here's a crazy stat for you. 11 of the 18 games, Hononegah has shut out their opponents. Their defense is phenomenal. They got athletes, from the line all the way back to the secondary. They got Jordan Dimke, who plays kind of a center fielder, and she's a tremendous basketball player, athlete on the track as well. A lot of talented players there. They actually are undefeated at 18-0, 9-0 in the conference, so they're conference champions this year. And again, the Nick 10 conference, they're not only good, in Northern Illinois, they're good on the state level. I mean, the sport's been around for 2 years now. This is the second full season, and they have another highly regarded flag football program. So, and just looking up and down the conference, there's so many good players.
Yeah, and I think this is what you want to see. You want to see the type of growth. Sounds like to me this thing has really caught wildfire and just caught on, and now you're seeing more teams field. These girls flag football teams, and I think it's well overdue. I think the female athletes can be sometimes neglected in their sports, but it's good to see, flag football actually growing the way that it's growing here in our community. And I mean, I don't know about you, Harold, but I just continue to see it growing and growing and growing. I think it's going to be a big sport.
I do as well. And according to the IHSA, last year they had 154 teams. This year they're up to 223. So that's a huge increase year over year. I actually think it's going to get even bigger after it gets into the Olympics. I think we're going to see more young ladies want to get into the sport because of that. And look, I know we don't want to talk about this too much, but the fact that Taylor Swift is into football as well doesn't hurt anything. So, I mean, there are a lot of factors.
Doesn't hurt, man. Doesn't hurt.
Yeah,
you know, again,
it
you know,
really
you just really, again, you just love to see this sport growing the way it's growing because, you know, again, not every female plays basketball. Not every female plays, you know, volleyball. Not every female runs track. So now you add this sport into the other female sports. I think it speaks volumes to, you know, where this game is going and you know, the platform that these females now have, you know, flag football at the high school level. And like you just alluded to, you know, at the Olympic level, I think it's an awesome thing to see for female sports here in the area for sure. And across the country.
Again, across the country and collegiately, now there's about 150, give or take, college teams out there as well. So if a young lady does want to continue her athletic opportunity on the collegiate level, she's going to have that opportunity moving forward. Now, most of them are clubs, so it's not, you know, a scholarship, but she can continue to do that on that level if she wants to as well. So again, it's a great sport, and I welcome anyone who has not seen this sport. The season's pretty much over except for the playoffs. But next fall, if you get the opportunity to go and watch a girls' high school flag football game, this is not powder puff football. These are athletes running around making plays, and it's a very exciting game. It is. Nice. And I invite you to check out a game. So yeah.
Again, congratulations to the Hononegah girls, and also too congratulations to all the actual teams in the area in our community that have actually started a team. Again, that just speaks volumes to the growth of female sports, particularly flag, as we're illuminating right now. You know, but again, you know, congrats to all these coaches that have actually taken their time to actually coach these teams and show these girls and help these girls with the fundamentals of the game of football. Because it's such a great sport. You know, in my estimation, definitely probably the top sport in the world. You know, so here we're going to go ahead and move forward. Last week, we had an opportunity. I had an opportunity to see the Belvidere North Belvidere game. What a treat that was. This is our take this week. I'm going to start with Belvidere North. They are, wow. I mean, it's hard to put into words. They're that damn good. I'm going to start with their offense. I mean, I like what Coach Beck is doing now. He's becoming a little bit more versatile in his offensive scheme that he puts together week in and week out. I'm seeing the ball in the air with Bucci a little bit more. Alexander's having a phenomenal career. He's their go-to receiver right now. Bucci and Roman keep doing their thing on the ground. Their O-line is doing a phenomenal job up front of just opening up gaping holes for both Bucci and Roman. And the other young man as well. I get his name mixed up every time because there's so many names over there. Bucci, Roman. The name will come to me here in just a second, but they're doing a phenomenal job, and I like what they're doing on offense because again, he's throwing in the pass. I think it's imperative that he continues to do that week in and week out. Particularly as you get closer to going into the playoffs, because again, you don't want to be that one-dimensional program. I think each and every year, we've kind of seen that with Belvidere. They go up against a team, they get stopped, their run gets stopped, and then all of a sudden now, they have no passing. But I think what they're doing now is great. I think they're setting themselves up for a good playoff run by adding the pass in there, and they've been pretty proficient. Bucci's been pretty proficient, with the pass, with this short stuff. Nothing really deep to where they're really stretching the field. But I wouldn't be surprised if here in the next week or two, we see Belvidere North really try to stretch the field to give them a really good shot going into the playoffs of really opening up that pass game and becoming more of a versatile team instead of a one-dimensional team. But what they did the other night, against Belvidere, no knock against Belvidere. I just don't think Belvidere's ready yet to actually compete with the team of that caliber of Belvidere North, but offensively, I really love what Belvidere North came out and did. They established a run, came out, established the pass, and I think they had everything that they wanted on Friday night against Belvidere. As it pertains to what Belvidere North did on defense, I mentioned in the show on the overtime the other night, Scott had asked me, what do I think of Belvidere North offense? Their defense. What do I like? And I said, candidly, I like all 11 hats flowing to the football each and every play. I think they've done that well. I think they're one of the better defensive teams that we have here in our conference. They have big playmaking ability. They turn the ball over. They create turnovers. Against offenses that they see week in and week out. I think Coach Fagan's done a phenomenal job of actually putting those core players out there to make those big stops. Kudos to that defense, but they played a sound game Friday night against Belvidere. As it pertains to Belvidere offensively, I think they just got a lot of work to do. I just think they're about maybe, at least, 5 or 6 good players away from really competing in the Nick 10. I know Strenquist lined up at quarterback, the other night. I really didn't like what I saw. I think he's got a lot more maturing to do, as he tries to put the ball in the air. What they did on the ground, I thought they did a decent job on the ground, but I just think that they need someone to actually complement Lopez. I think Lopez is a good runner. He's not a burner. He's not gonna pop 60 or 70. He just really doesn't have that top end speed from what I saw the other night. But they just need to get better in the trenches as well. I mean, I know Strenquist was under a lot of duress on Friday night. That didn't make it easy for him as well, as he was struggling to get the ball off. Again, he's got some decent arm talent, but he's definitely got a long ways to go. What they did defensively, again, they're just 5 or 6 players on defense as well, from really being a team that can compete with the Belvidere North and also to the Hononigas and also to, the Guilford. So, just a lot of work left to do over there at Belvidere with Coach Donnelly and his crew. But I think he's doing a good job of really actually trying to change that culture over there, as we talked with him last week regarding his program. So again, that's my take from what I saw over there at Belvidere, at Belvidere North last weekend.
Yeah.
Harold, I know you were, Harold, go ahead.
Yeah, I had the chance to watch the game film, so very different. I wasn't there to feel the crowd and feel the environment. I actually thought that Belvidere competed pretty well in the game. I know the final score might not have indicated that. And Tim, am I correct in that North took some kids out in the third quarter to maybe get some younger players in there?
Yes.
Yes. Is that what happened?
Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah. He did that. Coach Beck, he got some other guys into the rotation, which I thought was really, really huge for Belvidere North. With the playoffs looming, it gives them another opportunity to rest bodies. So I thought it was a really heads up play by him, because again, you're going into the playoffs in these next, few weeks. They still have Harlem left on the schedule. They still have Hononegah left on the schedule. So they still have some really tough games that they have, to where, for him to be able to rest bodies, Bucci, Roman, guys like that, and Alexander, rest those guys. I thought that was really heads up on him to be able to rest those guys. The game really, to be honest with you, Harold, the game could have gotten out of hand. I think Coach Beck knows that. I think he let off the gas a little bit. I don't think he really wanted to run up the score. And I think that was one reason why he also, too, was able to actually rotate some of his second team and third team players. But, not to take anything away from Belvidere. Again, I think Coach Beck did Belvidere a favor by actually getting some of his second team and third team guys into the game.
Yeah, and if we go back to the conversation we had with Coach Conley, the week before on the show, he talked about the fact that he just he knew that they were going to be down, but how did his team react? How did they come back? Sure, North took some guys out in the fourth quarter, but his team competed and they fought back, and that's something they can build off of. They got a big one this week against Jefferson that we'll talk about, but I think there's a lot of good things to take out of that game for Belvidere and Coach Conley. As far as you mentioned the passing game, I think it's interesting if to make note of this. So they're opening up their passing game, and I think part of that is probably to play into scouting for the playoffs, or at least a lot of times coaches will do that. They'll throw things in the second half of their season so that if a team is scouting them in the playoffs, they need to take more work and effort to plan for that. So if North is opening up their passing game a little bit, maybe a first or second round opponent might say, oh man, we need to now plan for that. So we need to take 15, 20 extra minutes of practice to go over these plays and we might need to switch our defense out, or maybe we can't, send 10 guys to the line of scrimmage, just to chase down a run. We need to keep 3 or 4 guys back. Like, we can't be as aggressive. So I think it's great strategy from Coach Beck. You see it at different, you see different teams and things like that. I think North we're seeing why they're the class of the conference. I mean, that's just another example of both sides of the ball, special teams. They're tremendous players. And I actually
Harold, only thing that concerns me about Belvidere North is their depth. They're just not deep. You just hope that these key players that they have, Bucci, Roman, and Alexander, all these kids stay healthy, these next 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks, because I think that's gonna play a major role, as it relates to how far they can actually really go. Because again, you take those guys out, and you saw it on Friday night against Belvidere when he put his second team, third team guys in. There were different athletes out there. They were definitely different athletes out there. But again, that's what concerns me really about Belvidere North right now. They just don't have the depth.
Yeah, and I would say that, every coach doesn't want to see a player get hurt, obviously. But, if you can sprinkle other guys in, in games like this, and North plays, they play Auburn this week, so maybe another opportunity to get some kids in, get some playing time who haven't gotten a lot of playing time. And then they play Hononegah, and then they finish up the season with a. I think you're going into the playoffs. Yeah, I think that's probably what they're going to do.
Yeah. I think you're gonna. I think you're gonna see a lot of that going forward. I think you're gonna see a lot of, guys, getting rest. Like you said, they play Auburn this weekend. So with that being said, I can see Coach Beck going back to that same strategy of really resting his starters and allowing his second team, third team to come in and get reps, because it's going to be vital here going forward for those kids to get reps. Because again, when you get into the IHSA playoffs here in Illinois, every week in the playoffs, it's a tough game. You're not seeing some of the teams that you see, week in and week out in the Nick 10. I mean, you're seeing some teams that may be 5-4 or 6-3, but playing a damn tough conference. So it's going to be crucial, to see him, continue to rest bodies week in and week out if he can. Again, like you just alluded to, they culminate the season with Harlem. Second to last game, they see Hononegah. So, I would imagine those 2 games there that I just mentioned, Hononegah and Harlem, we're going to see probably their starters off for the entire game.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if starters are pulled in either one of those games, or if the score gets out of hand in either of those games, as both are very good defensively and they understand how to keep a game close. So I would be surprised. But moving forward, I think North, they're going to continue to do what they do, which is run the football, play stingy defense, sprinkle in the passing game. And look, they plan on going deep into the playoffs. So they're starting to look at that now. And we have to think about that. We're over halfway in the season. Their teams, like I would say them, so North, Guilford, Harlem, they expect to go a ways in the playoffs. So they're going to start to look at, getting some other kids in there, maybe not playing our 2-way players every single snap.
Yeah. Yeah. So. And I would be surprised if you see that with Harlem too. Harlem, obviously, they still have to play Belvidere North. So, it's going to be interesting. Guilford, we could see all these top teams go to that strategy and say, okay, do we have the autonomy, to rest our starters, to allow us to, actually recover, these kids recover, because, you and I know both football's a violent sport. Recovery is key each and every week that these kids are properly recovering. And, it's not like you have 2 weeks off before you go into the playoffs. I mean, that subsequent week at the end of the regular season, I mean, these guys are, they're back into the saddle on Friday night, playing against, one of the first playoff teams that they meet. So I think it's going to be consequential that these coaches really pay attention to, what type of lead do I have? Do I have the proper lead enough to where, I feel good about getting my second team guys in, getting those kids reps? Do I feel good about getting my third team guys in and getting those reps? I think it's huge if you can do that, because again, you hear this saying all the time, you're only a sprained ankle away from being a starter.
Yep.
As cliche as that may
Yep.
sound, it's definitely true. I mean, again, my only concern about Belvidere North, not to continue to repeat myself, is just their depth. So hopefully these guys, their core guys can stay healthy, the rest of the season. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a game that you were at last week. You were at the Hononegah East game. Can you give us a little insight about, how much improved is Hononegah compared to last week to this week, as you saw them against East?
Well, I think they're improving offensively now that their QB's been there for a few weeks. The passing game's coming along. He's running the football. He's a tough kid. He's a tough runner. Might not be the most dynamic athlete I've ever seen a quarterback,
Sure.
but he's a tough runner. He understands where to get the football. His wide receivers, at least in that game, were able to get some separation, get a couple of open opportunities there. They're still going to run the football. Banker scored a couple more touchdowns on the ground. They had an explosive play from their wide receiver, who went the distance. And it's actually the young man that you mentioned, Giovanni, earlier in the season when we were talking. So just a real tough, hard-nosed game. They came out slow, though. I will say that. They came out of the gates real slow. Game was scoreless after one. Hononegah got a touchdown in the second quarter, and then they were on the roll from there. So, it's one of those games where, like, it's on your schedule. Going into it, you kind of know you have an advantage. And by doing that, you then maybe you don't take East as much. But it was also East homecoming. So we have to remember that. They're going to play harder for a homecoming game than they are, say, a regular season game that has nothing on the line like homecoming. So Hononegah was able to weather that storm. They got the 34-0 victory. I did want to call out one of the players for East who I thought was he's going to be a really good player. He's got 2 more years. Jared Quist. He's a sophomore running back.
I like him.
Linebacker.
I like him.
5'9", 200 pounds. He's a nice looking player. He really is. Ran hard.
Nice
I will say this: he created holes for himself. His offensive line didn't help him a ton. He got all 76 yards behind hard running, and he's got a little wiggle in him, a little shake. We'll have to see how he is the next couple of years, but he's a nice player for East. I was very impressed with him.
Right. And that leads me to my next question. I mean, Boylan and Hononegah square off, I believe Friday night, correct me if I'm wrong. Harold, we've seen how this game can go year in and year out. I guess my big question is this year, how big is this Hononegah now 4-2 versus Boylan now 2-4? How big is this game on Friday night for both of these two teams?
I think for Boylan, this has got to be the biggest game they have left on their schedule. I mean, this is a rivalry game for them and Hononegah. To knock off Hononegah would be a huge feather in their cap. I mean, just a huge feather in their cap, because then it really puts Hononegah under the proverbial gun to get to the playoffs, because they need another victory to get the 5 wins. They're only at 4-2 right now. Boylan's 2-4, but they won last week. But for the most part this season, they have disappointing, I guess would be the best word for that. So they continue to somewhat be an up and down team. If Boylan can somehow get this victory and even compete, can they get a couple more victories on the season? Yeah. Right. I mean, if Boylan wins this, they got to run the table to get in. That's a tall order to ask, that's for sure. Yeah. But I think it's, I was talking to Coach Zimmerman after the game for a minute, and he reiterated, and I'll just quickly just say what he said. We don't care what Boylan's record is. They're going to bring everything they got to the game on Friday night. He didn't want to talk about any game after that, any game before that. They're solely focused on Boylan because they know it's the biggest game Boylan's going to have probably the rest of this year.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a good game. I think both programs are a little down this year in terms of talent. I think you would agree with me and a lot of other people as well. but just looking at, the records, we're used to seeing, and that's why I throw the question up there, how big is this Hononegah Boylan game on Friday night going to be? Because, usually, this is the marquee game of the year. And due to Belvidere North doing what they've been doing the last 3 to 4, 5, 6 years, it's now been, Belvidere North, sometimes Boylan, sometimes Belvidere North Harlem, as we're seeing now, so in Guilford's now in the mix. So, this game is not probably going to get a lot of attention, so to speak, this week. And I think it's based on, just the lack of talent this year, the record. Again, Boylan 2-4. I mean, I don't think a lot of people saw this coming. I don't think a lot of people, saw Hononegah sitting at 4-2. I think a lot of people picked Hononegah to win the conference. So I, just looking at the records and looking at the talent on both sides of the football, I think we're going to see a good game. But again, I don't think this game is as big, so to speak, as it's been in the past years.
Yeah, I agree with your thoughts on that. I just thinking of the game, I think the biggest key in that game is going to be Boylan's offensive line protecting Cacciatore, because I think if he gets time, he's going to be able to find some holes in that Hononegah defense. But if they can't protect him, he's going to be under duress and he's going to have a difficult time. And that's what we've seen in the games where Boylan has really struggled. Their offensive line wasn't able to protect him. Cacciatore doesn't have time to see the field, get the ball out there. So we know, as we mentioned a couple times, Boylan's not up to the snuff. They're not up to their normal standard this year. They're just struggling for whatever reason they are. And I think I think they're actually going to put a really good showing out there. I'd be surprised if it's anything more than, I don't know. I think it's going to be less than 7 points. I think that's going to be the margin of victory, especially if they can protect their quarterback. If they can protect Cacciatore, I think that they have an opportunity to put some points on the board. And maybe get that Hononegah defense that is ultra aggressive in their front seven, kind of on their heels just a little bit.
It was good to see, though. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this, but it was really good to see the Titans get back into that W column, last week against Auburn. It was a well-needed victory. It looked like they came out and really kind of found their identity, not completely, but kind of found their identity and were able to actually expose some things that Auburn just couldn't keep up with them, but it was really good to see the Titans get back into that W column, because again, if you look at their schedule these next 3 weeks, I mean, that's, you're asking them to do a lot with the lack of talent that they have this year over there at Boylan.
Yeah. Tim, and now correct me if I'm wrong, was last week homecoming for Boylan? Because they seemed to play a lot more inspired football last weekend.
I don't believe so. I believe Belvidere North was their homecoming.
Oh,
I think they played Belvidere North. Yeah.
Okay, because they played really inspired football. I think they did a good job of kind of 11 hats on the ball on defense. Yeah. The offensive line played well. Yeah, they played their best game of the season for sure. It's their second victory, but far and away their best game of the season. So. Yeah, and again, it was really good to see them get back into that W column. Again, you're playing a team. I don't think Auburn's won a game yet this year, or have they? Have they not? Yeah, they won
one game. So you got Auburn sitting at 1-6, Boylan now at 2-4. You're playing one of the more less talented teams, so to speak, in Auburn, record-wise, in the conference. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Boylan plays on Friday night against Hononegah, who's a really, really good team, I think, this year. But again, just lacking some talent in some actually key positions. But I think it's going to be a test for Boylan. I don't think Boylan's really seen a test, I believe, since they played Guilford a few weeks here back.
Yeah, Tim, let me ask you this. Since
excuse me, I take that back. They didn't play. They haven't played Guilford yet. That game was, I believe, it wasn't East. Help me out here. What game was that they played a couple weeks back? Gosh, I forget who they played a couple weeks back. I don't have it here on my notes sitting here on my desk, but I think what my point that I'm trying to make is that Boylan hasn't seen a test in a couple weeks, so it's going to be interesting to see how well they come out and how well they respond on Friday night with a really well coached team and a really good team of Hononegah.
Yeah, I think you're thinking of Belvidere North. I think the team you might be thinking of, Tim.
Was it
But
Belvedere North?
yeah, they
You're
played
correct.
for
You're
home.
correct.
I
Belvedere North.
believe so.
Yep.
Yep. Yep. So I think it is going to be something. Tim, you've been around the Nick 10 conference for a long time. Do you think early in that football game on Friday night between Boylan and Hononegah, do you think it's important for Boylan to kind of build some confidence, get some good plays to happen so they're feeling themselves a little bit against the team like Hononegah?
I think in order for Boylan to be able to come out on top with this game, I think they're going to have to play a flawless game. I really do. They're going to have to play a flawless game. Everybody's going to have to step up. You're going to have really good quarterback play on Friday night. I think on both sides, but as it relates to Boylan, I think Cacciatore needs to have the game of his life. I think the young man needs to have the game of his life. I think he's good enough now, to where he can come out and he can actually put that offense in good position, to make sure that they're making plays and they're doing everything right by putting points on the board and creating good field position and making it really hard for Hononegah to stop their offense. I think it's going to come down to great, at the LOS, because these schools, both of these programs are known to have really good linemen. So it's going to be interesting to see who really wins that war, so to speak, in the trenches. I think as far as if you look at the skill players on both sides of the ball, I think it's parallel, to be honest with you. I think, Hononegah has, some decent, players at the wide receiver and the running back position. I think Boylan has some decent players, some decent athletes at the wide receiver and the running back position. I know Hernandez has been hot these last few weeks, so it's going to be interesting to see how much they feed him, against this well-coached team and tough-nosed defensive team as Hononegah on Friday night.
Yeah, I think so. I think Hernandez is a key. Besides Cacciatore on the offensive side, again, you talked about it, line of scrimmage. It's going to be a battle. If you go to the game on Friday night, just watch the offensive and defensive lines. That's going to tell you who's going to win that football game. If Boylan's able to protect their passer, open the running lanes, I think they got a good shot.
Yeah,
Harold,
they have to win all three phases. Is what I was getting at when I say flawless. Every play is not going to be a flawless play, but every play on offense, defense, and special teams, you have to. It's got to be quality play, so to speak, in order for them to be able to come out and steal that W on Friday night against Hononegah. As it relates to Hononegah, what Hononegah needs to do, again, they have to play all three phases to the best of their ability, because again, both teams, they want to beat each other. I think both teams are hoping to be able to win out to get into the playoffs, particularly Boylan right now sitting at 2-4. They have to win out. They have to win out. And I think, they understand the actual state of this game. How consequential is it for them to be able to win this game against Hononegah on Friday night?
Yeah, that's for sure. Because unlike when we were in high school, Tim, they can look up information on Max Preps or wherever they're going to look at it. They know the schedule. They know what they need to do to get where they want to go. They want to go to the playoffs. Everybody does, and they got to win all three games. And it starts with Friday night. It starts with the battle against Honno. And I'd expect it to be a good, hard-hitting high school football game, and I think it's going to be close.
Yeah, absolutely, agreed. Yeah. And I'm gonna go back. I want to go back to Belvidere North here for a second. Obviously they beat Belvidere 37-20 and improved to 6-0. My question to you is, Harold, can Belvidere North run the table these next 3 weeks?
Yes, and I'm not going to be disrespectful to the teams that are remaining on their schedule. I don't think there's going to be a game other than maybe Harlem that's going to be all that close. I just think that they're that talented. They're playing that well. Now, look, if there are a couple players that get dinged up or sick or anything like that, because that's at that right now is that time of year. I think that they're going to have a pretty, like, this week they play Auburn, then they play Hononegah, and then they play Harlem, right? So the schedule does get progressively harder as the season goes on here, but I think the Hononegah and the Harlem games will set them up for the playoffs. So I do expect Belvidere North to run the table. I do expect them to go undefeated in conference. Are they going to be challenged? Sure, at times they'll be challenged in the next
Right.
couple of games, I say, the last 2 games of the season. But I think that they can run the table. I think they're the class of the conference, and they have been for a while now. I think, and we mentioned it, game of the year to me as to who was going to win the conference was them and Guilford right out of the gate. And I think that's what is going to end up happening. Hopefully Belvidere North gets a high seed in the playoffs and they can maybe get a couple of home games. Yeah, but I think that they'll run the table.
Yeah. And looking at the schedule and just really, I've had a chance to watch Belvidere North a few times, actually a couple times this year already. And, I just, you look and see across the conference and you say, who has probably one of the most potent offenses right now that are really playing at a really high clip right now. And you look at Guilford, you see what they've been doing over the last few weeks. You look at Belvidere North, you look and see how, they've been playing, since week 1, in every game I've been to, they're always popping big runs for 50, 60, 70, 80, coming up with big plays on defense. You're seeing a lot of, they're not on the field long defensively. So, the defense goes back out, they make big stops, puts their offense in good position. They're getting, short field, because, you look at the Belvidere game, Belvidere, I'm not sure why they did this, but they were afraid to kick deep, so what do you do when you don't kick deep? You give a damn well good coach team that has some of the best backs in our conference, you give them a short field.
Yeah.
Makes no sense to me. At some point, you just got to say, hey, special teams, do your damn job. Do your job, stay in your lanes, close, make tackles, make the hit, make the play. Don't give up anything big. You have to be able to trust your special teams. And it showed on Friday night. Belvidere did not trust their special team. I mean, Belvidere North had a short field each and every time on the kickoff.
Yeah, that was a little concerning. It's a coach's decision. He knows that team better than anybody, but I think he was afraid of, Booker and the rest of the crew back there deep to run it back. And then they energize the crowd, right? And they energize the team. Well, if you give them a 60-yard field or close to a 50-yard field, and they only got to go 50 yards, like,
yeah.
do you want a slow death or do you want a quick death? Like, which one do you want?
Right. Exactly. That's what I really, as you go back and you look at the game and you're probably saying to yourself, why didn't Belvidere just take a shot at kicking it deep at least once? I mean, they never kicked deep, and you go back and look at the game. Belvidere North only had to go 30, 40, sometimes 50 yards just to get into the end zone, instead of making it a longer path to the end zone. What Belvidere did, they did the opposite of making it a shorter field for a well-coached team that has these types of playmakers, with the guys you just alluded to, Booker, Roman, Bucci. You got 3 of the best runners in the league on one team, and you're making it a short field for them. So again, I think it made it really hard for Belvidere to defend that.
Well, yeah, and if you're defending a shorter length of the field, that's why I was a little surprised they didn't try a couple of onside kicks there. At least be somewhat aggressive. But again, I don't know what Coach Conley was seeing and what he was, kind of training the eyes on and what they were working on. But that was kind of a head scratcher there by giving them a short field. And because then you put your defense on their heels there. And then, if they go down and score, then, the whole negative mindset comes in. And yeah, that's one of those.
At the end of the night, Harold, you just made it really, really cumbersome for the defense. You made it really, really tough for the defense. Again, you go back and you watch the game. I mean, there was a series that Belvidere North scored in, two possessions, and they came out, they set up the run, made a good pass when they needed to, pass the ball on 3rd and 6, on 3rd and 8. And again, you look at the playmakers at Belvidere North has on offense, I think, what I would have done as a head coach, I would have challenged my special teams guys. Because again, you don't give a good football program such as Belvidere North with those types of playmakers on offense. You don't set your defense up. You don't set your defense up for failure to where you give them a short field and try to have them, instead of having them go 80 or 90, they only have to go 30 to get into the end zone.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from there, Tim. The only thing I can say is I'd go back to Coach Donnelly and just ask him, like, what was he thinking at that point? Because, North hadn't shown that they were able to get the explosive kickoff returns against Belvidere. Against other teams, they absolutely have, but not against our team and our players. They weren't. So were you taking that out of your players' hands a little bit to open the game, and then you're forcing your defense to make a play to change the field?
And Harold, I get it. Harold, I get it, and I don't. Okay, you have I get it, because he was probably thinking, okay, I can't kick to those two deep guys because every week they've either returned one or picked up great yardage, right? So, again, you have to go back and you have to say, okay, special teams, this is why we practice special teams week in and week out. We go down, we kick, we cover, we do tackling drills. We do all these things. So if we do need to kick deep, I believe in my special teams to where I know we're going to go down and we're going to cover. We're going to make a play. And again, that just showed me he didn't really believe in his special teams guys.
Yeah, and again, I don't know.
And again, Harold, no slight against Coach Donnelly, but let's just be real here. There was a rhyme and reason why he never kicked it deep, and that's the only reason I can think of. Two reasons. Again, doesn't want to kick it to those guys that are deep; they can bust one on you. Or two, I don't really trust my kickoff team.
Yeah, and I did not look at this close enough to know is kickoff team and kickoff return team. A lot of times, if you do have two-way players, that's when you'll pull guys and give them a short breather in between, playing offense and defense. Is those special teams like that? Did he do that? Maybe. Again, I don't know. It very much was a puzzling decision to do that, because
absolutely
you're it's just you put your team in a less aggressive mindset, I guess.
Right.
And I look
and
at
you don't and Harold, you don't give one of the top teams in the state of Illinois, you don't give them a short field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
With those types of game busters that they have in the backfield, and then you add Bucci into the mix as well. You just don't. It's just something that you don't do as a head coach. My opinion.
Yeah. I would love to hear from Coach Donnelly and just what he was thinking and why he was doing it. Because again, it's either a quick death, they take it all the way back, or a short death where kind of you just, okay, instead of going 80 yards, now you're going to go 60.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like it gives us more opportunity to make a play on defense, from my vantage point anyway, from my belief.
Right. Yeah.
So
Harold, we're going to go ahead and move forward. With playoffs looming, there's some teams that are kind of on a bubble, so to speak. Which of these teams here in the bottom here have a shot of sneaking into the playoffs, IHSA playoffs this year? You got Belvidere sitting at 2-4. You got Freeport at 3-3. You got Jefferson at 2-4. You got Boylan at 2-4. Which of these teams do you have the best shot of sneaking into the IHSA playoffs?
I think Freeport's got a pretty good opportunity. They got some winnable games these last three. Interesting that Belvidere and Jefferson play, and the winner of that still has a shot at the playoffs. The loser of that's knocked out. So, it's kind of it's a playoff mode for both those teams this week. As far as Boylan goes, I think that they have the biggest hill to climb. They play Honega. They play, I believe, Guilford or Harlem yet in their last game. I mean, they have a monumental hill to climb. But I would say Freeport at 3-3. I think that they got a decent shot at making it because I do feel like they got a couple winnable games left on their schedule. Jefferson playing. I don't think they're playing at their peak. I think they may have peaked earlier in the season. They've taken a little bit of a step back here. Belvidere, we'll have to see how they bounce back from last week, lost to North.
Right.
To me, that's the most interesting game of the week. It's not the most important game or the best game, but I think it's the most interesting because, again, kids nowadays, they know what they have to do. They know their upcoming schedule. They know, hey, if we get to 5 wins, we're getting to the playoffs. So, kind of what happens with that? What kind of pressure do you put on yourself as a team? And as I'm sure the coaches have not mentioned this, but like the reality is you got to win if you're going to continue to play. Otherwise, you only have 2 more games after this week for the loser of the Jefferson Belvidere game.
So. And just looking at these teams here, I'm going to start with Belvidere. I mean, I just think, this is probably not their year for them to maybe sneak in. I think they're, again, like I alluded to earlier in the show, I think they're about at least close to a half dozen or a dozen playmakers away from being even a competitive team in the conference again. No slight to what Coach Donnelly's done over there at Belvidere. He's done a phenomenal job of just kind of like regalvanizing that program, so to speak, and reinvigorating that program and injecting that energy into that program. But just looking at their schedule here these next few weeks, and just based on what I saw against Belvidere North, I don't know if they have a really clear shot of being able to sneak in. Freeport, I could see Freeport maybe, sneaking into the playoffs. I know they have, some games left on their schedule that are winnable, but it's going to be interesting to see, they're coming off that sour loss last week against a really great, well-coached team and a highly talented team as Harlem. It's going to be interesting to see if Freeport can actually, punch their ticket. Again, I wouldn't bet against Coach Dedman over there. I think he's done a phenomenal job with the program. I think he's got a lot of key players. If they step up, I think they can get it done. I think they can be a 5-4 team, getting into the playoffs, this year in 2025. Jefferson, on the other hand, I don't think Jefferson's ready this year to represent the conference here in the Nick 10, but, being able to sneak into the playoffs. I think, they're a few players away of being a solid program. It's going to be interesting to see, how their JV program did this year, how they're doing, and how well these kids continue to evolve year in and year out, particularly those kids that are sophomores and then the freshman class as well. I think that's going to play a major role into their progress, year in and year out, for them to have to maybe even be in the conversation, so to speak, of being a playoff team. But I don't think this year is their year that they'll be able to get in. Boylan 2-4. Again, a lot of people thought Boylan a lot of people think Boylan should be 5-1. A lot of people think Boylan should be 6-0. I don't believe that at all. I think their record right now is what it should be. I don't think they played well enough to be a 5-0 or a 6-0 team. But it's going to be interesting to see how well they can play on Friday night is going to be really, I think, the telltale. Determining if they can actually sneak into the playoffs at 5-4. Again, I think it's going to be a well-fought game against Hononegah, but I think, Hononegah is going to come ready to play. But I think if Boylan's going to actually make a statement these next few weeks, I think they need to start with Hononegah. They kind of already started it by beating Auburn. Again, no slight to Coach McFadden of what he's been able to do over there at Auburn this year and then last year. But, I just don't, when you're playing a team, 1-6 team. Well, 1-5. Auburn came in at 1-5. Boylan at the time was 1-4. It's going to be really interesting to see if Boylan can now beat a team that's 500 in Hononegah. So, that's just my opinion as where it goes with these teams being able to sneak into the actual IHSA playoffs.
Yeah, I don't agree with your takes there. Jefferson, they've had some injuries on the season, and things have just kind of gotten a little bit of away from them. And I just think Freeport's schedule will allow them to get in at 5-4. Belvidere, I think they're going to compete in all their games. I just don't think they're going to get enough victories on the season.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, you just look at the schedule, what they have left. I mean, Boylan's got Hononegah to get past. Boylan loses that game, they're no longer playoff eligible.
Yep.
Any of these teams, Jefferson loses one more game, they're no longer playoff eligible. You look at Freeport. I think Freeport's the only team that you could say, okay, if Freeport can win this next one and build some momentum off that, out of these teams that we're just highlighting right now, Freeport does have, they probably have the brightest spot, right now, brightest shot to actually punch their ticket to the IHSA playoffs.
Yeah. I really like their quarterback, Olson. I think he's a nice player. He's getting better. He's improving from what he was earlier in the season. I know last week he got harassed by Harlem, but Harlem's going to do that to a bunch of teams in the Nick 10. They're a good football team. And look, they got the best combo of corners in the league. So, he's going to struggle against a team like that. But the rest of the season, 3-3, they need to get 2 more. Maybe they sneak in at 4 and 5. I doubt it, though.
Right.
Just looking, at the playoffs. But at 3-3, I think that they clearly have the best opportunity to get into the playoffs over everybody else. But it is nice. I will say this: it is nice to have the conversation for both Belvidere and Jefferson that we're talking about them having a shot at making the playoffs. That should be something that the coaches and players should take into account. Maybe not now. Obviously, you want to get in, but you're building your program. You're moving it in the right direction.
And again, Harold, they're 2 well-coached teams. Again, I'm just being honest. I think they're just, a dozen, a half dozen player makers away from really being, not really being, but being able to compete, so to speak, in this conference. I think I'm going to take that back. I think they've competed in the conference. I just think they haven't competed enough, to become playoff eligible, so to speak. Coach Donnelly's done a phenomenal job over there at Belvidere. He's in his 2nd year of getting that program sort of turned around. I think I'll give him a year or 2, and I think we'll be saying something different here in the next couple of years about Belvidere. I really do believe that. I think he's a good coach, one of the better coaches we have in the conference. I just believe right now Belvidere is a dozen playmakers away from being a competitive Nick 10 team.
Yeah, that's why, Coach talked about it last week in our conversation a little bit about, the Buck way or the Buck pride, right? Getting into the younger players to come and play and come out. So if let's say you get an extra 15 players, can you find, a handful of those that are playmakers that are going to help you, right? So that's why he's building the program. He's talking to the younger younger athletes in the Belvidere School District. I mean, those are all things that, they need to build on. And maybe if you get a couple more of those, maybe you're 3-3 instead of 2 and 4, and you got a better shot at the playoffs. Same thing for Jefferson.
And as it relates to Jefferson, I think Coach Casals has done a phenomenal job. The time he's been, coaching, but I think he's done a really good job of really turning that program around, so to speak. It's really hard, and people need to understand it's hard to turn programs around that have had a losing culture for more than 10 years. And Jefferson's been that program that, you and I know, and a lot of other people know as well. They've been really struggling, these last 2 decades to really, build a winning culture, so to speak, understanding what the standard is. And I think, what Coach Casals is going to be able to do, each and every year, he's going to be able to build off that year past. I think we're going to be talking about Jefferson a little bit different here, and I think in the next couple of years than we are right now in the present moment.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, a lot of folks on here are probably Chicago Bears fans, right? They've been in the doldrums for how long? I mean, they're trying to turn it around. They get Ben Johnson, they get Caleb Williams, they're trying to turn things around. It takes a time. And think about that now. Take that down to the high school level where you don't get to go and handpick players that you want. It's whoever comes through your program is who you have to play with. You don't get to, it's not college where you go out and recruit kids from wherever. Like that's not how it works. So building a culture, building a program, building an organization on the high school level, I think is one of the hardest things to do at any level of sports.
It's tough because if you think about it, you look at this. Okay, and I'm going to use Jefferson for an example, as we already own them right now. You know, you look at the last 2 decades, what Jefferson really lacked, and you would go to these games and you just saw you didn't even see a program. Okay, let me just start off there. You didn't see a program, you know, and you look at a Belvidere North, you look at a Hononegah, you look at a Boylan, those are programs. Those are programs. You look at a Harlem. I can't forget to include Harlem in that. Those are programs. And I think what you've seen, with some of the losing programs over the last, 10 years or last 15 years, particularly Jefferson, you just haven't seen a program instituted, as we're seeing now. I think Coach Casals is doing a good job of establishing a program instead of putting together a football team. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. There's a difference. A program, you're going to have goals. You're going to have a strategy. You're going to build a culture. You're going to have standards. And I think that's what we're seeing now over there at Jefferson. And I think that's why we're seeing the improvement that we've been able to witness over the last 2 years since Coach Casals has taken over there.
Yeah, I mean, just go to a Jefferson football game once. Like the amount of fans that are there in the last couple of years than they were prior to that is because of Coach Kaz and his staff and the players. So it's not only the coaching staff, the players are buying in and they're doing the work. They're putting in the sweat equity, as we call it. They're putting in the grit, right? They're making the changes that they need to make for the culture of the program. And sure, they might not see the results today, but look, a couple of years from now, the younger kids are going to come up, they're going to play
and
better.
That's why, and that's why it's so important, Harold, is to be able to build your grassroots programs up, So I believe, Flynn kids usually would go to East or Jefferson. You got your Eisenhower kids that would probably end up going to Guilford. It's really vital for these high school coaches to get into these schools and develop relationships with these players if they're not already. Some may not. But I think that's the key to actually developing a program, if you get what I'm saying. I think that's the roadmap to take to develop a program. Getting to know those coaches on that level, getting to know those players, making those players a part of your culture, irrespective if they're in high school or middle school. You see what I'm saying? Because I think if you do that, I think the chances of you getting those kids to buy in at an early age, I think you're going to have less difficulty with those kids once they get to high school.
Yep. Yeah, because then you can push them more and they understand, like, hey, we're building to something bigger than just the now. We're building to
absolutely
what's going to happen my junior and senior year, right? That's what. Absolutely. So I have a couple of friends that are Hall of Fame coaches in both Illinois and Wisconsin, and they talk about a couple of things on building a program. One of those is culture, but two, it's the idea of speaking to the kids at the younger levels and just keeping them going. So if you struggle when you're a 5th, 6th grade kid, right, 7th grade kid, just keep going. Keep staying in constant part of the program, part of the culture. You'll grow, you'll develop, you'll get bigger, and you'll learn from it. And at least where I currently reside, there's really great youth football programs, in the north of Rockford, right? So the junior Indian football program, that's what feeds Hononegah. I mean, Belvidere has a great junior Buccaneer program. Like, that's what feeds North right now.
Right.
A lot of kids in Rockford, I feel like they want to kind of funnel themselves over to Guilford. Why? Because they have a great program going on right now, and they're doing great. So, like, these programs that are up and coming, they're getting into the youth programs and just having the conversations with the younger kids to keep them involved and keep them invigorated so that they want to play football. They don't just want to kind of prepare for something else. And a lot of that comes down to a numbers game. If you have 100 kids, that's great. But if you have 150 kids, 175 kids in your program, how much better can you be to get 75 more athletes out there?
Right. Yeah. And again, like I alluded to just a second ago, I think it's important that high school coaches get to know, these kids on the lower levels, at these middle schools, because again, I think if you can get to them early, the chances of you having greater success as a head coach and building a winning culture, I think it's doable. I really do. I think it's doable. I know if I were a head coach at any of these high schools, that's one thing that I would be focusing on. That would probably be one of my main focal points, is really getting into the middle schools and drilling into these kids early the importance of the academia. About teaching these kids how to take care of their bodies during the off season, understanding what the off season is, understanding what your off season needs are, things of that nature. I think if you do that, you inject that type of energy in those kids at an early age, I think the outcome can be pretty successful.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. Inject that enthusiasm with the younger kids, and then as they come up, it's a kind of a snowball effect. Other kids will see, oh man, look at what Jimmy and Johnny and Joe are doing. Oh, I want to be a part of that. And then it, grows and gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yep. Absolutely. Here, let's continue to move on. Let's get to our, we're almost getting ready to wrap up here. I don't want to leave this out, but I think a lot of the viewers probably already know the list probably didn't change at all here after week 6. Again, Belvidere North still at 1, Guilford still at 2, Harlem at 3, Hononegah at 4, and then Freeport at 5. Harold, do you see this list possibly changing this week at all? I mean, we just illuminated the Boylan Hononegah showdown Friday night. I know Belvidere North, I believe they play is it Freeport this week?
North plays Auburn this week. So North plays Auburn.
Okay. North plays Auburn this week, and I believe Guilford plays
Freeport. Guilford
Freeport. I think
so that's the only way things change. Is if Freeport steps up and plays a great game against Guilford, and let's say Hononegah loses to Boylan, then they might flip-flop. If Freeport pulls off the victory, then they're for sure going to move up. But other than that, I think the top 3 are going to remain the same for sure, unless something really, really weird happens. I think maybe spots 4 and 5 may flip-flop at some point if Hononegah loses, Freeport wins. Especially if Boylan steps up big time and beats Hononegah, or Freeport beats Guilford. Those are the only changes that are going to happen.
And just looking at our list here, I just with what Belvidere's North is doing right now, I just don't really see them moving from 1. I think a lot would have to happen for Belvidere North to drop out of that number 1 spot in the Nig 10. As it pertains to Guilford, I think Guilford just needs to continue to keep rolling, getting better each and every week, and just continue to make plays. I mentioned this on the overtime show the other night. Scott had threw a question to me, about Guilford. I just said that, Guilford they need to make plays when they need to make plays. And what I meant by that was that, you go back and you watch some Guilford games, you see a lot of uncharacteristic drop balls, Taylor dropping balls, you see Messiah sometimes dropping a ball or two, those are 2 playmakers, probably two of the best playmakers that we have in our conference. And I just expect a lot of those 2. I don't expect those kids to drop balls the way that I've seen over the last couple of weeks. I just think they need to make plays because, again, with the playoffs looming, you want to be clicking on all cylinders, particularly Guilford. You saw what they did make the playoffs last year, but, got their butts kicked, over at St. Rita last year. I know they don't want that to happen again. So I think for Guilford, I think, all those playmakers that they all have to be playing well at the same time in order for Guilford to continue to push through the conference.
Yeah, I think they're going to start to lock in now that they can kind of see the playoffs just at the horizon or just above the horizon there. I would expect Keeson and Messiah to start to lock in there and play better, Weber to continue to play well. Porter just be the absolute beast
Porter's
that
on
he
fire.
is.
That kid's on fire right now,
I'm
man.
telling you,
He's a hard runner.
Hey, if he's not my favorite running back in the conference, he's got to be at the top of the list. I love watching that man run. He runs so hard. He'll give you
very
he'll
relentless.
give you a little wiggle, and then he'll lower his shoulder and run right over you. I mean, he's a fun player to watch.
And I think that's what Guilford's kind of been, just riding really, establishing their run game early. I've seen Guilford play a few times this year already. And, what I like that Coach Cap does, he establishes that run game before he opens up that pass. That saying, the run sets up the pass. There's some truth to that, because I think that's really been helping Guilford, in these past few weeks that I've seen them play, establishing that run, the hard running of the young man that we just mentioned, the hard running of him. And then, being able to, pop a, 15, 20-yard bomb to Taylor, or maybe go 40 or 50 up, up the sideline to Tilson. So, Guilford's going to have, a good shot of really, maybe possibly potentially running the table, these next 3 weeks, and then positioning themselves for a really good playoff push. As it relates to Harlem, Harlem just has to continue just to, play Harlem football. Don't turn the ball over. Believe in themselves and just come out every Friday night and continue to just evolve. I think Harlem has probably one of the better running games in our conference, and than the teams that we see here on our top 5 board. So Harlem just needs to continue to play like they have been, but always continue to play better. Hononegah, just continue to play better. Week in and week out. The last time I've seen Hononegah play was a subpar performance, but based on what you shared with me in the show, they had a good night against East. The big showdown this weekend against Boylan. Hopefully they can put themselves in a good position to really win out these next 3 weeks. Freeport, they just got to get back on track. I think they belong in the top 5. I think they're a top 5 team, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do in these next 3 weeks, because again, I think I think Freeport is better than the record that they're actually standing at right now.
Yeah. Yep. Agree with all the things you said there, Tim. And it'll be exciting these last, 3 weeks of the regular season here. And as teams kind of crank it up for the playoffs, there are going to be some battles down the way. And go out and support your team, cheer for them. Just enjoy it, because we only got 3 weeks and then we got a long winter coming.
3 weeks. Long winter. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, Harold, hey, I won't keep you, man. Hey, happy Thursday to you. I'm pretty sure I'll see you here in the next week or two. We'll talk soon. But again, Harold Bone, everybody from the Rockton-Roscoe News.
All right. Take care, Tim. Be well.
Thanks, Harold. Appreciate you.
See you.
Guys, we're going to continue to move through the show. About to close here in just a second. But remember, guys, again, as we always mention week in and week out, get out and support these kids. I think they deserve it. The type of work that these guys put in during the offseason. Wow. I mean, they really put in some work to get ready to come out every Friday night and showcase themselves and their talent, their abilities. Again, guys, get out, go support your teams. Remember, always check in with the Bailey Pod here. I'll be bringing a Bailey Pod again every Thursday. Just make sure, you keep supporting. I'll keep delivering. You keep supporting. Again, everybody have a good weekend. Be safe, be smart. And again, get out and enjoy your teams.